I believe that's what we call in the vernacular a complete crock of shit. Hello everyone! Welcome to Our Business with Ness. I'm Ness. I'm a children's book illustrator. I have a very fun video for you this week. I'm going to tell you about the 7 worst piece of illustration advice that I have ever heard. Some of them have to do with art, like with the actual creation process of the illustrations, and some of them are more about the business side of things, like bad advice for starting your illustration career, because that's kind of what we're all about on this channel. All throughout my illustration journey, I've heard some really bad pieces of advice, and some of them I really believed, and they made me waste a huge amount of time. I hope that by sharing this with you today, you can avoid doing the same. Now that I've learned a better way to do things than these, things are going much smoother for me, and I really want that for you too. Right before we get into it, if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this about illustration, make sure to subscribe and to hit the little bell. The bell sends you a notification every time I upload a new video, so you're sure that you won't miss any of the advice. So let's get right into it. Number 1, just keep practicing. Now, raise your hand if you heard this one before. I'm sure that's all of you. This one is a huge pet peeve of mine. Like, don't get me wrong, practice is important, but usually this advice is given kind of like as a throwaway line and doesn't actually specify anything specific that you actually need to practice. You've probably heard the gaming phrase, get good. Well, this is the illustration equivalent of this. No help whatsoever. If you're just mindlessly drawing without any specific goals of what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to improve, sometimes you just end up just filling up paper. Especially if you don't realize what your mistakes and weaknesses are and you just keep repeating them. So a better way is to practice with intention. Practice something specific and then go back to it later to measure if you're actually improving. That's much more efficient and you will get to your goals that much faster. So the next time you hear, just keep practicing, I challenge you to ask the person to clarify what exactly they mean and what specifically needs improving. Number 2, do everything the client asks and don't ask questions. I kind of get where this one is coming from. Like at the beginning, we're just so happy to have a contract at all and we don't want to rock the boat. So the artists who give this advice, it comes from a place of fear and lack of confidence. The thing is, your client is not going to be always a talented artist themselves. Sometimes they won't be an artist at all. Once in a while you will work with a very talented art director, but sometimes you just work with a random editor who has zero training in art whatsoever. And most of the time they will have good suggestions still and they will offer useful feedback. But once in a while they would ask you to make a change that just makes you go, what? That makes no sense. It will completely ruin the composition. If we change the shirt color to orange, the whole color harmony doesn't work anymore. This is an awful idea. Well, you are the illustration expert on this project. The end product will have your name on it, and you are responsible for the quality of the art. If you don't speak up to prevent this disaster, who will? Now, of course, don't say it the same way I did earlier. Be polite, respectful, and level-headed. I really believe that you can and should challenge a client as long as you're being respectful. Simply explain that you have concerns about the requested change because you think it will not work as well. Explain why, specifically, and state that it's so important to you to make the final art the best that you possibly can. Who can possibly argue with that? It also helps to accept some of the feedback and only push back on the really bad ones. So pick your battles. Let's slide the changes that you think are merely unnecessary and annoying, and reserve your pushback when you think something will truly negatively impact the piece. And as for questions, you should always ask them. Sometimes we can be embarrassed to ask a question. We can fear that we're gonna look dumb if we ask it. But at least we're gonna clarify the situation and possibly prevent a disaster down the line. Never end a conversation with a client when you're still confused. That's a recipe for disaster. I assure you that your client would much rather you ask the question than wander off not knowing the answer. Number 3. Real artists don't use reference. Now, in the last decade, I have noticed a good shift when it comes to this one. There's been a real effort to reinstate the use of reference to its proper glory. So you've probably already heard by now why it's a great idea to use reference often and a lot. But still, once in a while, I still hear this, and it makes me cringe every single time. Using reference does not make you a bad artist. You can't draw something if you don't know what it looks like. There's no shame in that. If you've drawn something often enough, you're kind of building a mental library in your mind, and you might be able to draw it again without reference. But if you're unsure at all about any part of your drawing, or if you run into issues while you're drawing, don't risk it, just look it up. I think every single project I worked on, I will look up reference at some point. If I have to draw, let's say, someone holding a screwdriver, I'll go, screwdriver. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember what that looks like, but just to be sure, let's Google that. The beauty part is that if you're good at analyzing the shapes that make up everything, then you can easily redraw the reference in another angle. You don't have to copy it one-to-one. Sometimes you just need to refresh your mind on the small details. Sometimes you just need some architecture inspiration to draw a small Italian village. And sometimes you just can't get the damn hand pose right and you really need to look up a reference because you are losing your mind over this. Whatever it is, there's no shame in that. Go ahead and look up all of the reference that you need. It will make you a better artist. Now, I have 4 more pieces of awful advice to share with you, but before we get into those, I really love you to go into the comments right now and tell me what is the worst piece of advice that you've ever heard. Those can be so fun to read about, so I really look forward to hear what is the most ridiculous ones that you've ever heard so we can commiserate about it. Alright, number 4, just keep posting on social media. That's one that I heard a lot in the beginning of my career and still to this day, and it's never really worked for me. Sure, if you can build a very large following, you might attract some art directors too, but that's a very big if, and it takes an incredible amount of effort to achieve. I find that social media is a lot like a message in a bottle that you throw at sea and just really hope that someday in the future it will be found by exactly the person that you need. It's kind of a long shot. By contacting clients with other means, you can achieve the same thing with a much smaller amount of effort. But we hear this advice so much that a lot of aspiring artists think that social media should be their first move, or even that it's the only possible move. That is not the case. Aspiring artists often reach out to me and the first question out of their mouth is, I'm trying to get work, but I'm having a really hard time building up my Instagram and Facebook following. How can I get more followers? And I'm like, if what you need are contracts, why are you trying to get more followers? Those are not actually the same thing. And it's not their fault at all. If you believe this too, it's not your fault either. It's this bad advice that's everywhere. You can build a wonderful career without social media. There, I said it. Or you can use social media only as one of your many tactics. It doesn't have to be the end-all be-all. Number 5, don't look at other artists' work. This is often said in relation to building one's own unique style of illustration. When I was in art college, I was told, your style should come from within. Don't look at what other artists are doing. It will taint the process. It's copying. Find your own style inside of you. That's what we call, in the vernacular, a huge crock of shit. I really believed this advice for a few years, and it really stunted my growth as an artist. Sure, you don't want to copy a single artist's style one-to-one. That's copying. But you should be influenced by many different artists to find out what appeals to you. Now, I really believe that you can't create an art style out of nothing. It's like squeezing a dry sponge and expecting liquid to come out. That doesn't work. Fill up your sponge with many different artists in many different medias, in many different disciplines. Find out what you like, what excites you, what feels right. And then you can take little pieces out of all of your different influences, mix them up, combine them in your own unique way. That's how you develop your style. Number 6, put as many things as possible in your portfolio. I talk about this a lot. This is a very common mistake that I made myself at the beginning of my career. It all stems from this very bad piece of advice. Just cram everything in there that you possibly can. An art director will hire you for something. Not really. Your portfolio is like an argumentative essay. It should have a single goal: to convince an art director to give you a specific type of job in a specific market. Anything that doesn't achieve this specific goal doesn't need to be in there. This includes pieces of art in other styles or from other markets. It also includes pages on your site that you may not need. Sometimes artists wonder, should I add a blog on there? Should I offer my personal portrait commission services? Add a shop to sell my hand-knitted scarves? A list of my favorite local cafe? Most of the time, the answer to all of this is no. It all sounds lovely, but it's not really relevant. You can always make a separate website for your blog, and you can link your portfolio from your blog. But your portfolio website should just be your portfolio, I think. And finally, number 7. Don't try to make it as a professional illustrator. It's too hard. It's impossible. Where do I even begin with this one? It's not true at all, and it's so discouraging. We hear this all the time, very often from people who aren't artists at all. It's often from friends and family, and very often it's from a place of concern. But sometimes it also comes from professional illustrators themselves, and that's even more appalling. They've had a hard time getting their own career to take off, so they just believe that it's a dead-end job, and they try to convince everyone else of that it's not even worth trying. It's not true. There is a lot of work in illustration. There's children's books, advertisement, editorial illustration, games, movies, animated series, home decor, paper goods, scientific illustration, clothing and apparel, etc., etc. Just look around you. There's art on your t-shirt, on your cereal box, on your walls, in your street. It's everywhere. As humans, we have an almost compulsive need to decorate every available surface. Assuming that there's no work in illustration is ludicrous. It's all around us. Artists are getting paid every day to create those illustrations. Why not you? So there we go. These are the worst 7 pieces of illustration advice that I've ever heard. Now, if you're looking for some good advice for once, I suggest that you download my free guide. It's called 5 Common Portfolio Mistakes That Are Costing You Clients. I will leave the link in the description below to download yours. As I said, it's completely free and it gives you actionable advice for things that you can do today and immediately improve the quality of your art portfolio. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help me grow this channel. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for being here today and for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!